Testing, testing, 1, 2. New microphone, who dis? For the next few days, my focus is going to be on completing this room. This will eventually be the nursery for the house. Those of you who've watched the tour of this 1 acre site may recognise this as the room that I was living and sleeping in. That was because we were plastering another room. That's now finished, so all of my belongings have been moved back into that one so we can get this one ready, prepped and finished. There is a very firm deadline on getting this done. My partner has booked the carpet fitters for 3 days' time. There's nothing like a bit of pressure to focus the mind. So before that happens, I've got to complete this room, which means a mist coat on every single wall, all of the carpentry, so architrave, skirting board, window boxing and surround, and a dado rail. I've also got to fit the fireplace, put in a new hearth. I've got to fit the downstairs lights as well, because once the carpet's down we'll have no access, we won't be able to lift the floor. I then need to plane the floor so it's nice and smooth and get the finishing touches on. Another thing I have to do is fit the radiator to that wall and the pipework that comes to it. The first thing that I'm going to do is give all 4 walls and the ceiling a sand. The plastering is a great finish, but it's just to knock off any potential high spots, smooth it out, and then I'll give it a wipe down and onto the mist coat after that. But I'll set up a time lapse now, so you can see me buzzing around this place, getting as much done as possible. Okay, that's all 4 walls and the ceiling sanded down, nice and smooth and all the blemishes taken out of it. It's time for a mist coat. Now, all of these walls and the ceiling, as with every other wall in the house, I've overboarded onto the masonry, or on the external walls, I've internally insulated and then overboarded with plasterboard on top of that. So this plaster is all just what's called a skim coat, which is a very thin, sort of 3 or 4 millimeter coat of plaster. It has been left to dry for more than 4 weeks now, which is always recommended. And then after that process has happened, after it's cured and gone off, it's time for a mist coat. Now, a mist coat usually is trade emulsion that's watered down. I've gone for a matte white, pure brilliant white. And you add roughly 30% water to 70% paint. And that's because fresh plaster is usually very absorbent. If you don't do this process, more often than not, what happens is the paint will start to peel because it doesn't bond properly with the plaster. That can cause some issues further down the line. So it's always a good idea to do a mist coat as your first coat on fresh plaster. Because there's such a lot of painting to do in this house, I do plan on investing in a paint sprayer. But for this particular room, and because time's against me with the carpet being due in a few days, I'm going to use your bog standard tray and roller and a paintbrush for cutting in on the corners. Now, I've already added 1.5 litres of water into the bucket. I'm going to add another 3.5 litres of paint into that and mix it together. I'll be using a paddle mixer on the drill. You can do this by hand, but you know, if you get one of these for £10 from a good hardware store, it makes the process a lot quicker and you get a much nicer blend. Now, the water is added to the mist coat so that the plaster can absorb it. What can happen if you don't do this is the moisture in the paint as it is absorbed really quickly and it leaves a film on the top of the plaster which flakes off over time. Now that the paint's mixed, let's head back inside and get it on the wall. You'll have heard me say outside that I'll be using a brush for cutting in. Now, all cutting in means is using a brush to get the hard to reach bits like the corners before you go over the whole wall with the roller. that's the cutting in done. Now this only went on 10 minutes ago and it's already completely touch dry. That's how absorbent fresh plaster is. And the reason we do this is to give your secondary coats and your top coat of paint a great surface to adhere to. Well, there we go. That's all 4 walls and the ceiling done with the mist coat. There is a dribble of paint left. Anyone would think I planned that. It's now 20 past 10, so pitch black outside. So I'm going to call it a night and pick this up again tomorrow. Good morning. It's now day 2 of project Get the Nursery finished before the carpet arrives to be fitted. Busy day today, so I'll give you a run through of what I've got planned. The mist coat that was put on yesterday has now had time to completely dry and be absorbed by the plaster, which means it's time for me to do the second and then the subsequent third coat of paint. Pure Brilliant White matte emulsion on the ceiling and the top third of the wall. And the reason I'm only going to paint the top third is that I will be fitting a dado rail or a picture rail in this room. The reason for installing the picture rail / dado rail, I'll pick one and stick with it, picture rail, is that it's in keeping with the decor of a property of this era and this time period. I actually had to rip out quite a lot of the existing picture rails that were in here as they were riddled with woodworm, they were rotten and flaking and falling apart and needed replacing. The other reason for the picture rail is with this being the nursery, we wanted to soften the feel of the room a little bit and make it a bit cozier and a bit homelier and warmer. So for that reason, we're going to be hanging a nice patterned wallpaper from the floor up to the picture rail and then having the white above that. I also need to fit the downstairs spotlights today because we won't have access to under this floor once the carpet's down in a few days' time. But first things first, let's get this painted. That's the first coat of the white emulsion on the ceiling and the top 50 centimetres or 20 inches of the wall. And that needs about 4 or so hours to dry before I can do the second coat. And in that time, I'm going to go downstairs and fit the spotlights to the ceiling. I'm also going to loose hang the radiator just over there. When I overboarded the ceilings in this place, I made sure to draw the lines on. Now they denote where the joists are above. That's for 2 reasons. The first being it makes it easier to get your fixings in. And the second is it makes sure that you don't hit a joist when you're drilling the holes for your downlighters. You wouldn't ordinarily have to do this, especially in a new build or a later build property, because the joists will be spaced at regular centres. However, in a property this old, they can vary from 45 to 50 centimetre gap between the two, down to somewhere around 25 to 30. So it just makes sure that you don't hit any joists when you don't want to. Anyway, that's enough talking. I'm going to get on and measure out where my downlighters are going to go and drill the holes. some of the joys of renovating an old house. You can do all the prep and all the planning that you like, marking off where the joists are so you don't hit them. But inevitably, you're going to hit a noggin, which is this thing here. That now means I've got to go back upstairs, lift the floorboard and cut a notch out of that noggin for the light to fit. Okay, that's all the holes drilled in the ceiling, ready for the downlights. So the next step is to go ahead and run the cabling from one to the next in series, which means lifting some floorboards, running some cabling through. Now the lighting circuit in this building I have done in the 3-plate method. That won't mean anything to most people, but I'll do a future video on the electrics that have gone into this place in the future. But for now, I'm going to lift the floorboards, run the cabling through, chisel out that noggin that I managed to hit, and then I'll be back on with the nursery. That's all of the cables in to their respective downlights under the floor. Now, those of you who've watched the Oak Mount Grand Tour video will know there were originally 7 chimney stacks on the roof of this building, and we've removed all but 2 of them, one for a future wood burner and one for an open fire, hopefully. If you've not watched the Grand Tour video, I'd encourage you to go and give it a look because you get to see just what we've got ourselves into. Now, removing those chimney stacks means that this is going to be purely a decorative fireplace. We have retained the original Victorian feature, but for now I need to build up this hearth so it's level for the new carpet and fit a new smaller hearth ready for us reinstating the Victorian fireplace. So I've just finished laying the new hearth base, and while I'm waiting for that to go off, I'm going to make a start on the window surround. So this will have a full wood frame on it. The reveals, so these bits here, will be 25mm moisture resistant plywood. There'll be an MDF window board for the sill and a heritage architrave going around the edge to finish it off nicely. So it should be in keeping with properties of this age. I've just got the sill fitted, and I thought I'd mention I'm not going to spend a lot of time filming this process for this video because it's mainly focusing on the nursery project as a whole. But I've got plenty of these to do in other rooms around the house. So if anyone would like a video on the specific process that goes into making what will be the finished window surround, let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to do it in future. Just had the text to say that the skirting boards, architrave and picture rail are being delivered shortly. So in readiness for that, I'm preparing those areas. Now, around the bottom of the wall, I've done what's called sizing, which is a PVA and water mixture simply pasted on. And all that does is it seals the plaster and gives a better adhesion for the adhesive when you put it on. Now, around the door, a little bit more work to do. I'll show you actually. Because I've overboarded, you can see that the wall actually sits further out than the door frame. Now the way I'm going to remedy that is with some 21mm pine attached to the old door frame, which should bring it flush with the wall, ready for the architrave. Now I will be finishing that off with a veneer on the inside of the door to give it a nice flush look. So yeah, I'll get on with that. Quick tip. If you're struggling to remove these old screws, they're the flathead type because they've had layer after layer after layer of paint on them over the years. A quick tip is to run a saw down where the slot is whilst it's in the wall. It gives your screwdriver something to get some purchase on and prevents you rounding it off if you try while it's still full of paint. that's the frame extension on the inside there. I've also taken the time to remove the paint and plane this down so there's no visible join between the two. You can see there now it's perfectly in line with the wall and ready for the architrave. The architrave skirting and picture rail have arrived, so there's now two jobs to do. One is to sand them down, the other is to get the third and final coat of paint on this ceiling. Now I've only got one camera and I think you've seen me paint the ceiling enough, so I'll let you watch my dad sand down the picture rails. The final coat is on the ceiling and I'm now ready for fitting the picture rail. So I've used my laser level to set it 50 centimeters down from that point there, and I'm going to keep that level all around the room. With this being an old house, the ceiling does undulate and drops off in certain points, but my picture rail is going to be perfectly plumb. Now the way I'm going to attach this is put a couple of nails in there, some grab adhesive on the back of the picture rail and sit it on there, just because I'm working on my own at the moment. And then once it's on, I'll fix in some nails so there's a mechanical and a chemical fixing. perhaps I'd just briefly pause the time lapse there and explain how I'm approaching the internal corners on the picture rail. This will be the same for the skirting boards as well. Now there's two approaches, or two main approaches. One is to mitre the joint, which is to cut directly down the middle at a 45-degree angle and join the two together, and I will be doing that for external corners on the chimney breast. However, for the internal corners, and because the angles in this room aren't 90 degrees, I'm using a coping saw to cut down a profile on the picture rail. And you can see that the profile I've cut into the picture rail matches the profile perfectly. Now what that means is I can simply slot that into the corner and you get a perfect join. Anyway, that's a brief explanation of how I'm approaching the corners. I'm going to get on and fit the rest of the picture rails and the architrave. So that is the end of day 2. It's just gone past 11, which is why I look a bit more dishevelled than I did last time I was on. Good progress today. The picture rail is mostly on apart from 2 pieces. Architrave is on apart from the one in the corner that I still need to fit. Window surround fully completed. The hearth has been set in place and the fire's been attached to the wall, and quite a bit of the skirting board is on as well. I've run the pipework in under the floor for the new radiator, so I've got to get that fitted tomorrow, skirting board finished, picture rail finished, and then a coat of paint on all of the woodwork. Welcome to day 3. Jobs for today: finish off the picture rail, finish off the skirting, fit the radiator and plumb it in, and then get at least 2 coats of paint on all of the woodwork in the room. I think it's going to be quite tight because the carpet fitters are coming in the AM tomorrow. So wish me luck and let's get cracking. I didn't film a final shot of me doing the picture rail, but I just thought I'd show you how that profile cutting works for the corner joints on the skirting board. And there you go. You can see you get an almost perfect joint all the way up, and that's now ready for painting. there we go. Finished and ready for the carpet. It is 5 AM. You might have seen the sun come up on the time lapse. Pulled a bit of an all-nighter to get it done, but the paint needed to be on way in advance of the carpet so it doesn't cause any issues. Picture rails on and painted, mantelpiece is in, fireplace is fitted, window box is done, radiators plumbed in and ready to go. So I'm going to go and get 2 or 3 hours sleep and I'll pick this back up once the carpet's being fitted. Here we are, day 4. I've had my 3 hours sleep. You'll have just seen Reese doing a great job fitting the carpet. So now it's time for me to do the final job, which is hanging the wallpaper. Now I've done my prep, set my table up, mixed my paste. I still need to put a plumb line on the wall and I've checked all of my batch numbers. That's something I would say is essential to do when you're hanging wallpaper, is to check your batch numbers. On this roll, it's there. And if you make sure that every single roll has the same batch number, that guarantees a consistency. It means they're on the same print run, using the same ink, and should, in theory therefore, be the same colour and the same print. If you mix batch numbers, there is a chance that they will vary slightly and it might be noticeable. So always a good step in the process to check those. But that's enough of me waffling on, so I'm going to go ahead and get these hung on the walls. And here we are, the end of day 4, and the nursery project is completed. If anyone has any questions or queries about any of the processes that I've used, any of the approach that I take to any of the little jobs or the little tasks, please put them in the comments below. I do try and answer as many questions as I can and reply to as many comments as possible. I will try and get some more regular videos out. This one took a bit longer because this took a lot of my time and I wasn't able to edit and upload the videos, etc. Please do like and subscribe. It does help the channel to grow, and there's some really interesting projects coming up in the next couple of weeks which will make it into video. There's some driveway gates to be made, there's a new water main to the house to be installed, there's some renovations on some other rooms in the property, and there'll be a little bit of landscaping outside as well. But yeah, that's everything. I'll put some pictures on of the finished room so you can take a look at it. But thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.